The Steam summer sale is running now through to July 10th, and in this video I'm going to give you 20 strategy game deal recommendations. We're kicking it off with a much hyped game when it released last year. This is Manor Lords at 35% off, down to and roughly approximately $23. This is a historically authentic and truly immersive real-time strategy kingdom builder game, initially developed by just one dude. Manor Lords received its celebrated first anniversary update somewhat recently, and it continues to receive free game updates at about 4 or 5 each year, though it remains in early access on Steam. In my opinion, it's a great-looking, immersive medieval city builder. The focus on detail, organic townships is great fun, though things like trade can sometimes be a little bit tricky to manage. At times, aggressively fluctuating global pricing can get in the way. In my view, it's still a great game that, in its current form, can overall probably provide you with about 30 or 40 hours at least of gameplay before it starts to feel a little bit repetitive. The second entry on my list is Ara History Untold. This is a grand strategy almost, Civ-like game, where you select a Civ and leader and build an empire throughout time. Quality of life factors drive the game's city building, fueled by a detailed and progressive system of goods and crafting that uses the tile improvements to produce amenities for cities or materials for war. The recent Living Strategy update changes your very view of the game. It feels more natural and more familiar for 4X fans. Reductions to micromanagement, namely that citizens can now automatically supply improvements with supplies, also makes a huge difference to the overall playability of Ara that now performs better too. In full disclosure, Ara recently sponsored a video on my channel. That's not why it's here, but in the interest of fairness, an alternative pick here will also be provided, and we'll talk some more 4X historical strategy later in the video. There's many more games, actually, in this genre. But the alternate pick here could be Millennia, with a similar ages system, though leaning into some alternate history here and there. There are many similarities between these two 4X games, with a focus on goods production and supply chains. However, I believe Ara History Untold is probably overall the better game, and the better long-term buy as well. Ara is semi-regularly updated with positive steps towards the future, while Millennia has kind of been radio silent since a fairly minor fix in January of 2025. Let's move on to my next entry. A fairly cheap pickup, actually, at just about $5. This is Hexarchy, a blend of a DECK building card-based game with a 4X game. It's quick to play, genuinely very speedy. You're looking at maybe 30 minutes for a game on a fast speed, 60 minutes on a slower speed. And it combines a little bit of that RNG, almost roguelike element of building a civilization using the cards that you have on offer. You can choose to keep some, put resources aside. You're ultimately managing a 4X empire, and the playability, the replayability of this game is truly immense, from daily, weekly challenges, multiplayer if you've got friends and that's your thing, or even just the single player mode. Honestly, I highly recommend this, a very fun, very unique 4X game. Next up, we have Timberborn at 30% off, bringing it down to still a, fairly beefy by this video's standards, about $22. This is a brilliant city builder game. Not only do you have the fun atmosphere of, managing a colony of these little beavers, but the physics base that supports its water physics, that supports actually the broader consumption and automation features that drive the city building in Timberborn is just brilliant. I can't recommend Timberborn highly enough, actually. It's the kind of game that initially seems fairly straightforward. You might think, 5-10 hours of gameplay, but it can easily balloon into, I would say, over 100 plus hours, and it continues to receive updates. A familiar theme, I hope, throughout the course of this video. I like long supported games. Speaking of which, let's take a look at a classic. My next recommendation is one of the 4 award-winning classics as part of Anno's History Edition. My particular favorite is Anno 1404, though to be honest, I think they all have roughly the same discount. And for somewhere between $5 and $10, you can pick up a classic Anno city building resource management experience. These games, though, of course, are showing their age a little bit, though the modern remasters do a lot of heavy lifting to carry them across the line. If you're looking for a more definitive Anno experience, for me, it's not that futuristic one, no. It's Anno 1800. This is a game that is fairly bloated with DLC at this point. Like, to be fair, many of the other strategy games in this list. I mention it in particular because this game, Anno 117 Pax Romana, is releasing in November of this year, so maybe you want to pick up a classic Anno game. You've still got a few months to familiarize yourself. I think 1404 and 1800 are both great. Now, have you ever wanted to manage a space program filled with little green dudes? Well, Kerbal Space Program is a simulation game about doing just that. From designing the many varied spacecraft to dramatically violent eras, to space exploration, to new planets and discovery, Kerbal offers a uniquely both serious, physics-based game with a simulation about creativity, playfulness, and what is ultimately a fairly light-hearted universe. The original game here is a great deal. Pocket change, 90% off, down to about $3 US. You also have the option of the much more modern 2, the sequel, either as maybe a more expensive alternative to this or as something for the future if you find you really enjoy the first game. I think this one is the deal of the sale as far as the two of them go. Next up, a game honestly that's a bit of a throwback. This is Besiege. At 90% off, it is truly chump couch change at roughly $1.50 US. This is a sandbox game about building contraptions to roll over your enemies, to destroy your enemies with. You can play against levels, progressively more difficult, or just in a sandbox mode. Choose your enemies, chuck them in, kind of like Totally Accurate Battle Simulator, if you're familiar with that game. What sets Besiege apart is that somewhat recently, considering how old the original game is, has a new update. Now, not just air and notably land, but also the sea is your domain. Again, physics-based, build your contraptions, fight against the worlds, play multiplayer, or just sandbox mode. It's a cheap pickup and genuinely a lot of fun for that value. Next up, let's talk Civilization, a 3-for-1. Firstly, at 15% off, I know, not great, bringing it down to $60 US. Again, I know, not great. This is Civilization 7. For the most part, this is not my recommendation for a Civ game in this sale. However, if you like a 4X game that genuinely looks very modern and clean, if you like the Aegis system, you don't mind changing of civilizations, this is genuinely a fun Civ game. Like, full disclosure, I like playing Civilization 7. Is it a noteworthy deal though? Is $60 US really a sale? No, absolutely not. Let's talk about then the real deals when it comes to Civilization. And I think the main one is probably Civilization 6. The base game, if somehow you don't have it, you're a regular viewer of this channel, or even just a strategy gamer, if you don't have it, you really should. 95% off, easy pickup. The thing with this game and the next one is that they are really at their best when you have the core DLCs with them. I'm talking, for Civilization 6, things like Gathering Storm. So, if you're looking to invest, the best deal here is actually probably the Anthology. You want to try and get the DLC for it, the main DLC, the extra civs don't matter so much, for the best price that you can. If not, the base game is a good starting point if you are truly a Civ virgin. Alternatively, and my favorite Civ game, is Civilization 5. At 75% off, again, it's a similar story, right? The base game is $7, pick it up, you can have fun with it if you're brand new. If not, again, the core DLCs are a great pickup, so if you can get a bundled version for a reasonable price, I think it's about $20 in this sale, that would be the version that I highly recommend you go for. Both Civilization 5 and 6 have their own player bases. They have really stood the test of time, unlike Beyond Earth, as noteworthy Civilization games, and I believe, genuinely and honestly, that either of them would be a good pickup if you're new to the franchise. Alternatively, there are a few extra picks. Old World at 75% off, about $10 US, is a blend of Crusader Kings 3 and Civilization, in the sense that really people matter. Each turn is a year. Your ruler, their dynasty, their family, their advisors, and their enemies matter. Personalities and people are a focus in this 4X focused strategy game. And of course, you have Humankind, from Amplitude Studios, about $13 US, a similar 75% off discount. This game is now, I think, a little over 3 years old. It, generally speaking, continues to improve as it ages. And I think it was a little overlooked when it launched. It absolutely had problems. These days, it is a still great-looking 4X strategy game, and maybe a fairly cheap alternative to Civilization VII if you want to get into that ages thing. You want a generally polished, good-looking experience. Humankind could be a great pick. Worth noting here as well, just as a little extra for experts, Endless Legend 2 is coming out soon, so the base game for that, Endless Legend 1, has a similar discount, a similar price from the same developer, and that could also be of interest to you if you're interested in these kinds of games. Speaking of upcoming sequels, my next entry is Slay the Spire. At 75% off, about $6 US, this game debuted in 2019 with overwhelmingly positive reviews, and it's stayed that way ever since. A roguelike GECK builder unlike any other. Huge replayability, doesn't matter what platform you're playing this game on, it is great fun, and with Slay the Spire 2 coming out allegedly in 2025, this year, you might as well pick up the first one. I can promise you a huge amount of playtime and genuinely just a lot of fun. You can play this game for 5 minutes or 5 hours. The replayability is immense, the roguelike features are incredibly well implemented. A highly recommended title for me if you can't tell. And now, we have Galactic Civilizations IV Supernova. Supernova, by the way, being the default edition. It's a game that I'd recommend you just pick up the base version to begin with, though it does have some DLC, and the DLC is generally pretty good. At this price point and this discount compared to other titles in the video, I think it's probably best to pick up the base game. It's a real-time strategy game, it's a space strategy game, and there's a huge amount of depth, not just in the ship customization or the faction building, but well beyond it. Just like Stellaris, it's a great pickup. Speaking of Stellaris, the next entry, also a Paradox game, is Europa Universalis IV at a very generous 90% off. It'll come as no surprise to you as to why that might be, because yet again, the next version of this game, 5, is scheduled to release at some point, I don't know, 2027? Either way, it has been announced it is coming, EU5 that is. So, now seems like a good time to pick up EU4. Start with the base game because it is incredibly complicated. This is a grand strategy game, unlike most others. A huge amount of depth, very difficult to pick up. So, start with the basic and work your way from there. Equally grand, but in my opinion, easier to pick up is the next entry, Victoria 3. 70% off, just slightly over $15 US. This is a grand strategy game that will surprise nobody when I say it's set during the Victorian ages, right? The Industrial Revolution. Choose a nation, almost any nation, and a very grand map. This game largely focuses, in my view, on the economic simulation, the socio-economic side of running a country. Though warfare is prevalent and better than it was at launch, absolutely. This game continues to receive updates, and it's a great grand strategy title. The next entry on my list speaks to a game, a movie franchise, a book series, everything. Dune. Dune Spice Wars is unfortunately just 60% off in this sale, and like the last entry in this video, I believe actually a greater discount could maybe be justified given the age of this title. However, at about $15 US, this is a real-time strategy game that you don't need to be a Dune fan of to enjoy. I picked this up knowing nothing, literally nothing, about the franchise when it released, and I got a good 40 or 50 hours of solid gameplay before I found it just to be a little bit repetitive. A good multiplayer game, a good single-player game, it's a brilliant fantasy RTS. Speaking of fantasy strategy, the final title in my list is Age of Wonders 4. Again, at 40% off, it's a little bit more expensive than most things here. I can understand why Paradox maybe didn't discount it as much as the rest of their titles, because it is very good, very polished, and still somewhat new. My strategy game of the year of 2023, I think it's a great buy. Like, probably many other games I haven't mentioned here. Time is not infinite. Hopefully you've enjoyed this fairly efficient look at 20 strategy game recommendations for the Steam Summer Sale 2025. Should you have some more, do leave them down in the comments below. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.